Welcome to our second LinkedIn Live Financing Your Future Insights from a Fractional CFO. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and thank you to the Beard Bros and Beard Bros Media at the intersection of culture and the industry. So founded in April 2018, Beard Bros Media is a direct extension of the minds behind Beard Bros Farms. Special thanks to Bill and Jeff, founder of the Beard Bros Farms and Media, and Brian Holler, the CMO for Beard Bros. Stay tuned as we all hit the road in Q3 and Q4 all over the country, namely here with yours truly, Elliot Lane of Benzinga Capital Conference in Benzinga. They both have local and national events and upcoming conferences that we'll be attending, including Benzinga Capital Conference, Chicago, Illinois, that will be October 8th, and the more local market spotlight in California and Anaheim on November 11th. So welcome, Elliot. How are you?
I am great. Rachel, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm pumped. I'm excited. I love the Beard Bros. I watch all of your videos. So I think I'm the one who's blessed here. Said it on LinkedIn the other day, but you are a powerhouse when it comes to cannabis finance. So I thank you for letting me grace the screen with you.
Definitely. And so happy to see you here on LinkedIn Live. We get to see each other in person all throughout the country. I saw you in Florida recently, and then I saw you in Culver City, California a few months before that, I think. And so you guys are all over the place.
It's been a busy year. Normally, I think people know us for our two larger events throughout the year in South Florida and then in Chicago, upcoming, which you mentioned. But this year, we invested more into the space, of which we can get into in a little bit. I'm not sure if you want to jump right in, but we wanted to go on the road a little bit, right? The idea was originally roadshow-esque, but it's not a true roadshow. We're not doing this 1 week after the next, right? We're putting a lot of thought and intention into the markets we visit, but it's still it's been a lot of fun and honestly incredibly educational for me and the rest of our staff to go a little bit deeper into these markets.
Well, and I want to say on that note, I thank you for bringing the industry together, because that's what we need. We need both a local platform and a national platform, and a way to get together the best of minds and the folks that are actually very serious about the industry, from operators, ancillary brands, everything. So you really pull everybody together. And
thank you for coming. Really good feedback. Thank you for coming, right? Thanks to everybody for supporting and participating in our events. Events are meant strictly to be a place where business gets done, right? Whether it's on the consumer level or the B2B business level. And it's our job to make sure that value is easily achievable. But it does not happen, without the right people there. So it's continually us thanking our audience for joining us.
Definitely. So give us a little background on you.
So I jumped into Benzinga. It's 6.5 years ago, probably closer to 7 here in October. I was a standard business development rep, but I was not strictly cannabis, right? Benzinga, which we can dive into a little bit larger here, is much larger than one industry. But I was working on the events team. So naturally for us, that was a heavy dose of cannabis. After a while, especially leaning into COVID, Benzinga went virtual relatively quickly. So I started hosting our Cannabis Insider podcast, of which I actually didn't start. That was our chairman, then CEO, Jason Raznick, who started that with a few of our other leadership. And naturally, they got a little too busy, a little too ahead of their skis. But I saw an opportunity there for us to provide value, for us to provide a platform for executives and companies throughout the industry. So I kind of, before they laid it to rest, I basically was like, hold up, let me jump in. Let me try and see what we can do with this. And I think that podcast really provided a lot of insights, especially for our audience, to what's actually happening in the cannabis space. So we spoke with executives from, C-suites of the larger MSOs down to startups, in Colorado and California, right? We spoke to executives everywhere, all across the world, internationally. And that, to me, is where I really started to understand the cannabis space, is just listening to executives, listening to what their obstacles were, how they were strategizing and driving profitability if they could, right? In a tough market. So just listening to executives and then providing them a space where they could tell their story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We actually still host that podcast, just not me. It's two of our amazing writers in Patricio Little and Abby Higginbotham, and then Nico Rodriguez also steps in every now and then. But we still have that podcast of which they host executives all the time. But for me, that was how I expanded my network. Really, I think it's how we expanded to people, such as Beard Bros, albeit I didn't meet them at the podcast, but that sort of media is where I ended up in order to meet Beard Bros. So,
Right.
It's been, I think, really fun and value added to the space. And so with that, all along the way, my job was still events, right? My job was still growing that. So I was able to take those relationships I made in those interviews and feature them in person, right? Help them connect to their peers and investors, on a more personal level. So that is the journey, probably a little bit more long-winded than you were planning.
No, that's great. I just didn't know you were a co-podcaster here. So,
for several years, but not for several months now.
Well, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Yes.
Speaking of which, we just, my camera started working about 30 seconds before we became live. And so we had some little jokes kind of backstage, diamonds are made under pressure, which I absolutely love. And it's so relevant for this industry because we're in such a pressure cooker on so many different levels. I guess, do you want to chat about what you heard in, say, your podcasts? Were there common themes and meet with executives? What are some of the struggles? Just some of the common themes. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody listening in, or even yourself, right? I think the main topics that we are always talking about are always the topics that that entrepreneurs are paying attention to. Whether at the time of the podcast, a lot of our discussions centered around congressional participation on the federal level, such as safe banking. We spoke with several people who were heads down and very hands on with the Climb Act. We've had U.S. Representatives Dave Joyce and Brian Mast on our show, right? So just really understanding, from that level, what they want to do and how they see the space growing, down to the people who are actually building it. That's something where it's always reflective of the environment. So if I was still hosting it right now, I would be shocked if rescheduling wasn't discussed on every single podcast. However, as you know as well as I do, that the opinions on rescheduling versus descheduling versus who actually is going to control the industry, right there, it would be incredibly interesting, intriguing, and educational discussions.
Right.
But it all comes down to me talking about the opportunity of the industry. So that's how we would form our interviews, our questions, our shows, was how is this business investable versus how are they participating in what we hope will be a more investable market. And that was the premise of our show. Because of our larger listenership, they're either cannabis professionals participating and wanting that investment, or they're investors looking at the market overall.
Right. Yeah, and we're definitely going to touch on rescheduling. That's part of what we're going to talk about. Tell me about Benzinga as a business, what we might not know. And I just learned actually in the last week myself about Benzinga.
And this is my personal campaign is to unite the true ethos of Benzinga with what everybody thinks of when they think of us within the cannabis space. And right now, I feel like what people probably know us for are either our cannabis coverage, right, our articles, or our conferences, probably more so our events. But Benzinga was started 14 years ago, and we are in two words: financial media. We are in the same breath, not the same breath maybe, but in the same vein
Mhm.
as a Yahoo Finance, a Bloomberg, a Reuters, a Seeking Alpha, a Motley Fool, a Benzinga, right? We're the, I think, I don't know, 18th, 19th largest digital publication when it comes to financial media in the US. So our whole ethos is driving in investor education, information, news in very quick to the individual audience so that they can invest and grow their personal wealth with the same, um, I would say, resources as an
Mhm.
institution does. Right. So institutions have been trading and investing on this information for decades and decades. Right. But individuals haven't had that benefit. Right. Unless they, they're advanced investors and they work through, some sort of trading technology. Whereas Benzinga and others, to respect them as well, have developed a very quick and insightful news platform, both paid and free, depending on what level of access you want, to get them that information. And we are all about the individual. We are 25 to 44-year-old middle class dudes. Right? I think, we have a lot of women that read our information as well. But just looking at demographics of those who trade stocks,
Mhm.
that's pretty reflective of that audience. And that we try to bring those emerging markets, right? Like cannabis, like crypto, like psychedelics, like fractionalized real estate investing, like crowdfunding opportunities, right? Things that you and I as individuals can participate in and grow our
Yeah.
wealth. That's where Benzinga lives. And so with cannabis, we jumped in covering stocks, right? Covering those public companies, covering the ETFs of the space, right? And that's why we still cover them actively, is because the individuals can participate.
I love that. So let's talk about a couple of maybe your headlines that you'd see and some noteworthy headlines you like to chat about that you'd see on benzinga.com.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give you a sense of like earlier this week, we saw, headlines on Trump, right? Headlines on the election, headlines, on what stocks to invest in if Biden wins, right? What stocks to invest in if Trump wins, right? Today, looking at what's trending, we're seeing the large banks, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, they reported better than expected earnings. Why? Because the market is talking about inflation, and they expect the news around inflation to be rather positive over the coming months,
Mhm.
right? For one reason or another. Maybe they think it'll better itself because we're getting closer to an election, or I think for the first time, it was reported either this week or this month that the overall prices are actually down for the first time since 2020. So that is a storyline that Benzinga would report on, right? To give context around the market, to give context around investing, to give context around an industry. We do a ton around technology. You've probably seen a ton of Elon Musk headlines come out of our our news if you're looking at that. But then we have, of course, industry specific headlines around cryptocurrency and especially cannabis. Our top headline right now that's being searched is Village Farms, the size of their greenhouses in Texas, and they're U.S. listed. They're a Canadian operator, international operator, I should say,
Mhm.
but indirect holdings in the U.S. But they have, was it a greenhouse spanning over 100 football fields in
Wow.
Texas, right? So we cover the industry both from an operational standpoint to a financial standpoint, giving people the insights of how these businesses are growing. We cover product launches, we cover dispensary openings. We cover, I would say, roughly 30 plus articles a day around the cannabis space on benzinga.com/cannabis. There's never a shortage of news in this space, and you can find a lot of it in Benzinga.
I love that. So let's talk about bridging the overall economy with cannabis. First, let's set the backdrop and background of where we are right now, where the U.S. is market-wise, and I think you touched on inflation a bit. I think obviously unemployment is down a bit. Um, what is the ecosystem that is the backdrop for cannabis right now?
The ecosystem of media,
Of market. I'm
uh,
sorry, of the market,
of the
the
market.
financial
Gotcha.
markets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. So I mean, again, and I would say not a surprise to anybody here, but liquidity is tough to come by, right?
Mhm.
Cash is hard. So you saw, actually, I would say probably like middle to end of last year, and this was interesting when I was doing the podcast, is to see what marker within a public company's earnings in the cannabis space did investors judge their success by? And that marker actually shifted from season to season, right? From quarter to quarter. But probably for the past year, free cash flow and operating cash flow has been a marker that a lot of investors and analysts were talking about. I think that's probably starting to shift again, right? To discussions around debt and making sure that we're refinancing, because there are several companies in 2024 that need to refinance their debt. There are going to be tons of companies in 2025 that will need to refinance their debt. This is all on the public company side, in terms of what we're able to know and see. But free cash flow, was very, very looked upon as, if you could get there in a positive light, you're moving in the right direction. So cash flow, of course, is always tough, and how much it costs you as a business to get that cash flow,
Mhm.
right? One thing I think that we don't cover enough is, we're always looking for the larger deals, the larger M&As versus the smaller ones, right? The smaller ways that companies are generating cash, because there are a lot of good operators out there, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that within this industry, there's a lot. Every person who touches the plant has difficulties and obstacles that I, as a media company, couldn't. I don't know what that feels like, and I have such respect for those companies. But when it comes to operators out there, there are those who are doing well within the space, and a lot of times they're quiet. They're not loud, and we come across those quite a bit. Anyways, I know I'm getting off your original
No,
question there, but
I love the organic way that you're going to various topics. So I think that's great. So let's bridge it into cannabis. So the cost of capital in cannabis obviously has historically been very, very high. The obstacles in vaping is more than just economy. That's the result of politics right now. But the cost of capital in general, do we see potentially with rescheduling that will lighten up? And what is it like right now?
I think so, because I
Yeah,
think it's a supply and demand, right?
right.
I think with rescheduling, there's a lot of expectation that institutions will participate at least more, whatever more
Mhm.
means. We'll find out. But I think, I think it was Toby, from I forget the name of the fund, but a family office,
Mhm.
on Twitter, who said it a while back, and I thought it was very insightful. Was basically, like, investors don't need the growth between where we are now and rescheduling taking place. There
Mhm.
will be enough growth after federal movement, after rescheduling, after maybe Congress gets in place, whenever that is, right? Whatever would happen first, obviously, it's probably going to be rescheduling, assuming you think that's going to happen. But they can jump in at rescheduling and still see a pretty massive uptick in their investments in the cannabis space. So the thought process there is, once that happens, you'll see a lot more institutions jump in, which means the cost of capital is going to come down, right?
Mhm.
Just by wanting to invest in an opportunity, it's going to be like a buyer and seller's market, right? In the housing world, right? It's just a buyer and seller's market in the cannabis investment world. Albeit, I still think it will be a transition. It will be a process. It won't happen overnight. And that is, I think, important for entrepreneurs to understand, is that the structure of what rescheduling will still take time.
Mhm.
Nothing will happen overnight when it comes to how this will affect our industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, especially in an emerging industry such as this, they need capital.
Mhm.
There's either
Yeah,
organic growth or the cost of capital is so high that folks have way less free cash flow, which is, inhibiting growth ultimately.
mhm.
I'm looking forward to seeing that lighten up for people.
Yeah. Sorry, just going back to our Village Farms
Yeah.
headline. I was cracking up at their electric bill. Sorry, that got me, Charles.
The electric
But-
bill is really high.
Yeah, for 100 football field greenhouse. I would agree. Anyways, sorry. That was just
That's good.
made me chuckle.
Yes, I mean, what we've seen in general is like investor fatigue, or investors potentially not knowing what they're investing in, not knowing what to look for in operators. And on the other side of it, I like to look at this from the operator standpoint, where they don't know what they're going to do at times. So they need to ask the right questions when they're so-called getting into bed with investors. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What should a business owner look for when they're getting into bed, so to speak, with an investor?
I mean, you want to look up of how much business, or you want to pay attention to how much business you are letting them in on, how much the investor wants to be silent versus active. And you should be ready for that. A lot of times when you grow, though, you need participation. You need the expertise that a fund brings, because they are literally built for growth. That is their whole purpose, is to take a business from one point, invest in them, put money in them. So their win is growing your business and exiting, or taking the win in whatever form or fashion that looks like, right? But when it comes to cannabis, you have to be ready for that. You have to be ready for that stage of growth that you're raising for, right? A lot of times in cannabis, you see people looking for money, but they're not prepared for what that means. And you have to be ready for both participation and the growth, that would come with taking an investor. And honestly, you got to be ready to pitch an investor. And there's some great services, great people to reach out to, thinking like a Seth Yakatan, thinking a Dr. David Kunick. There are people out there who can help you with that in terms of getting ready for that. But we at Benzinga, bringing this back to our conference, and when we have the Cannabis Capital Conference, there are a ton of people who come to that event not ready to have the appropriate questions, not ready to have the answers for the questions investors are going to ask, right? So, if you don't have experience with that, get, like I would say, a consultant, at least for a little bit, to help you understand what that means, or talk to somebody who's raised, do something, right? But a lot of times people will come to our events and be like, they don't have
like deer in the headlights.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
then they may blame the event for the fact that they didn't raise money.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that, event is flawless by any means, but I think there are things that companies can do to be much more attractive to investors,
Right.
and the right investors. And sometimes you'll say no to an investor, and that's okay too.
I think that's important. I think it's important to look at investors and say, hey, if I need some management help here, I can only scale a business so far, and I actually need your expertise. Do you have a team to help me? Or like you said, are you going to be a little bit more silent and just bring the money and expect the results? And sometimes that works too. It depends on how strong your management team is, depends on how strong your vision is, your goals, everything. So
you have to know how much of your company you're willing to give up. You have
Right.
to know how much, we've all watched the show Shark Tank. That's the whole conundrum. Whenever you have offers that are made from the sharks, right? They're asking for, they want to put less money in for more equity ownership of your company, right? You want to give them less ownership of your company for more money, right? So that's a lot of the negotiating power there. But right now, the investors are, when they give equity, they're taking a lot in return, right? So that's the cost.
Stakes are very high right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what would you say is prepared for just a few bullet points? Well, I think just what we went over, right, in terms of understanding how much of your company, like understanding the questions that they're going to ask, as in what is your ask, right? How much are you looking to raise, and what are you going to use it for, right?
Exactly.
Understand what you're going to put that money to, right? And a lot of people do not have the answers to those questions.
Right. Well, and if you have a company that you're not operating very well to begin with, I hate to say, adding money to that problem is not going to make the problem go away. So what you have to prove as a business owner is you have a method, you have efficiencies, you have a goal, you have a plan, you have a management team that essentially knows how to work together. And so you can execute that plan. what I see quite often is not the strongest management teams, or a lot of issues within the management team. So it's almost like Congress. You can't get anywhere with it, So these are all the things to look at. And I think when business owners are looking at whether it's good to take investment, like you said, Elliot, it's like, what are we going to do with it? Is this just like maybe more of a loan, like a bridge loan? We need it for operating expenses for the short term because we just opened a new store, for example, and we just sunk a bunch of money into a new store, and now we have lack of operating capital. Or is it going to be used for building out, more operations and expansion? So there's a lot of different purposes for that, and it's important to be clear on that.
And one more, and this is probably where somebody like yourself, Rachel, could help a lot if people are interested in this, is understand your market. Like you would call a realtor to help sell your house. They're going to say, we should list it at this price point so that it's not on the market for more than 30 days, right? And people don't start asking questions, but you're still trying to get as much as you can out of it. What's the actual market for a dispensary in New Jersey? Right. Can you actually sell it for $2 million?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on like the local regulations. It depends
100%.
on, because are the local jurisdictions going to allow you to transfer the license? What's the license transfer process? That's number one that I've seen in these situations. And especially, let's not even add social equity to the component.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so, what's the local license transfer? Do you have to buy the entity? Do you have to buy the stock? If you have to buy the stock, how long has the company been operating for? And if that happens, we have to get tax clearances. We need to look at the financials, because when you buy the stock of a company, you're buying all the baggage that comes along with it. So these are all the things to also look at. And you'd be surprised how often I hear, some of our clients calling us and saying, hey, I just bought a XYZ, and I'm like, okay, and then like 2 years down the road, we find out that there's all kinds of baggage, state and local tax baggage, audits that were never addressed. The list goes on and on and on. So due diligence in whether you're selling, buying, merging, taking investors, taking debt, not so much. I think generally the terms are fairly clear there. I guess it depends on what type of debt. It can get quite complex, but a loan, let's say, that's much easier. But due diligence can't be understated how important that is. And the way this industry in my history has worked, I've been in the industry for about 10 years, started in SoCal. And so, these are the days of cowboys, right? And it still is quite the days of cowboys. And, cannabis is a very localized culture. So we work across the US. So SoCal is very, very different than Central California, which is different than Northern, which is different from New York, which is different from Texas, which is different from the Midwest. So it's really interesting how the culture, there is an overarching culture in the way that the businesses operate across the country, but it still is very localized. The behaviors of a lot of the operators.
Oh, 100%. And you look, even MSOs, right? They make decisions market to market almost entirely differently, right? The umbrella may be the same, but how they look at each market should be different, at least in terms of growth. But like I said, reach out to Rachel Wright if you're looking to sell or buy.
Thank you for that plug. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, usually what I do is I team up directly with an attorney. You have to have an attorney, ideally, and an accountant by your side, and you can't have really one without the other. Both have to understand what the LOI is, and like you said, the investors. Who are you getting involved with? I actually even look at, if you have to stay involved with that company for a long time, and you essentially have to work with them for a long time for some type of compensation plan. Who are these people? So if you're tied with them for a very long time, you got to understand who they are. Is this a kind of group that you can work with? Are they folks that have integrity? So these are, and then do you have integrity too as an operator? Are you? So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
And it's a
Absolutely.
real give situation, but you just got to make sure these are the right folks for you to get involved with, and vice versa. That's why they do their due diligence. And, I think we need to look at this industry as we all need each other in a lot of ways. There's a little bit of, I don't want to say infighting within the industry, but yeah, I guess I could say it like that.
I think there's 100% in
That's
this industry.
Yeah. So maybe not candy coated. It is what it is. People look at investors as enemy, and then I don't think investors look at operators as the enemy. I think they look at those with maybe askance with what are they maybe hiding, because historically the industry has, in my experience, I'm just speaking from my experience, we're going to present our best foot forward as operators. So but in the long term, and as the industry becomes more and more mainstream, the more and more we're going to need each other.
Well, this is a great point, actually, that Marjo, and also she says you're the boss, and I agree. That's a great point. One. Second great point is it's exactly referencing our earlier point, though, of know what you would part ways with equity wise, in an investment, right? Understand the market and what investors want, and hesitate going to market if you're not ready for those terms. Right. So I think to your point, due diligence is massively necessary. And to our earlier point, you may not be ready you may not want to work with the terms right now that would require you to grow in the way that a fund would help you grow. Right. You may be able to do it on your own. Right. And a lot of people can't. Some people can. Right. But I think that absolutely emphasizes the point of just understanding your needs and what you would use the money for versus how much you would part ways with, and how much help you need versus the actual market and what's happening.
Right. Totally. So kind of going back to markets and circling back to Benzinga as well. So you have a national conference, which I absolutely love, twice a year generally. Right. And then you also have what I love even more myself personally, because like I said, everything is so localized, and we have the market spotlight events with Benzinga. The one I went to was in Culver City. I think a bunch of folks just went to the one in New Jersey. And how did you decide to start doing those types of events?
Well, I mean, the roadshow idea is a prevalent one, right? Within any events organization, right? Can you do a roadshow? Can you have a lot of micro events that maybe funnel people to your larger events, which maybe funnel people to your larger ecosystem, right? And I think a quick note on that, media ecosystems are generally large, right? Maybe something that a lot of people don't understand is that events, we're one silo of a much larger company. Right. I would say with Benzinga, you look at, we have a large subscription, platform where thousands of investors get data from us. We work with most every major retail brokerage in the US when it comes to giving them our data around why stocks are moving a certain way, or, our news feed for certain tickers when it comes to stocks. Right. So our events is one way that we engage industries. Right. And it's a really cool way to engage unique emerging markets like cannabis. So we did this. We started it as an investment conference in mid 2018. Actually, I think in Toronto, right? So we started with partners. We had done a terrible cannabis event in Denver or in like 2015. I wasn't here for that, so I can't. I'm very happy to send my resume. I think it was called Weedstock, by the way.
Nice.
So if you can find any media on that, I'm sure they'll say it was terrible. But so we took a few years off.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So we came back. We started in 2018. We did one in partnership with, then it was New Cannabis Ventures and Alan Brockstein. And we brought opportunities to investors, right? With the power of Benzinga Media and our reach and our platform, we worked with, an analyst, a pretty well-known analyst in the space at that time, to bring both opportunities and investors together, right? And that first one was probably somewhere around 800-ish people, I think, in Toronto. And so we did 4 of those in 2019. We did Florida, Detroit, Toronto again, and Chicago. And all were incredibly different experiences. And then we were planning on doing that again in 2020, but obviously we all know what happened then. And we took some of that online. And then we came back at the end of 2021 in New York. I don't think the market was quite ready for in-person events yet. So we had around 500, but then we were acquired by Behringer Capital. And that is a private equity fund that emphasizes the ecosystem of events, subscriptions, and media. So they worked on Adweek and built them into what they are today. They're collaborating with us now. They're working with Inman, an incredibly large real estate media and events platform. And then the next year, they kind of worked with us on our model, and we went from 500 at the end of 2021 to over 2,000 registrants at our Florida event in early 2022. So it was a very actually quick jump into being an industry conference. And there, we started to understand how our audience wants to behave at events. So now I would say, we have created a lot of different avenues for networking at the Cannabis Capital Conference, whether it's private networking, whether it's mass meetings, as many meetings as you can get in, whether it's exhibits, right? There's a tons of ways to engage in meeting people at our event, which is the whole ethos of a Benzinga conference. We're the place where deals get done. And, I'm very proud of that because I think it is true. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of financings that happen every year at our events. We have, I would say, multiple M&A conversations happen because of or at our event. We're a place.
One of my clients is a success story there because I met an investor on behalf of my client when I was there, and deal was made. So
great.
I'm a testament.
Love that. Yes, yes, I love
Right.
that. So I think we are a place where money moves. Is really the end goal, but we're not a miracle drug. The market is what it is, right? So you still need to understand your investment thesis, what you need as a company, right? You still need to understand if you take debt, if you take a combination of equity and debt, how much you would give up for equity. You still need to understand that as a company, right? And understand that equity investors are still slim right now, just overall, right? They're taking their time, right? It's not that they're not participating. It's not that there's not dry powder out there, but they will move for incredibly proven business models. So that being said, I think money moves at our events. And I think as the market improves, with equity investments upon rescheduling, assuming we get that this year or soon, then I think it'll move even more. So that is the ethos of our events. Is we're not just a place to come and get investments. We're a place to come for partnerships. We're a place to come for expansion. We just had a brand sign a massive licensing deal at our New Jersey event. Yeah. So, we are a place where business gets done, where money moves, and where you can grow. But, I think understanding your goals coming in obviously is what helps have a much better event performance.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. On that note, so we said we were going to talk about rescheduling. Let's do that. Obviously, none of us have crystal balls. Even watching, say, for example, what has happened recently, jump over the pond to Europe in elections, folks thought that the elections were going to turn out a certain way, completely turned out a different way the next day. Yeah. So everything is so unpredictable that nobody has a crystal ball. It's just things happen in today's society and in the world that we just are not expecting. But in light of that, I was actually at a client's the day that the news came out about potential rescheduling. And, my client walked into my office and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. Hey, this means we're not subject to 280E anymore. This means that we'll be able to do interstate commerce. He's getting ready to ship, product out the door." And I'm like, no, hold on. This doesn't mean anything yet. Right. And so this could be about a year, 2 years off before we see anything, if we do. And there's some danger with the upcoming elections that it could inhibit rescheduling. Right. Obviously. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't want to get into the oversimplification of one party or the other. Right. I think both have proven somewhat inept when it comes to being friends for the cannabis industry.
100%. Yeah.
I think right now you have Piper Sandler just announced if Biden wins, MSOS is a stock you should invest in. I agree with the investor I saw this from, which again, I think it was Toby on Twitter. Recommend him as a follow. Great follow. That's lazy man's thinking per Toby, right? I think there are plenty of friends on the GOP side of politics that are pushing for cannabis, i.e. David Joyce, i.e. Brian Mast, i.e. Reschenthaler, right? Who is not a friend of the Democrats, right? But you look at the congressional committee led by the GOP that's looking to potentially block rescheduling and understand why Biden even made this recommendation, or Biden's administration made the recommendation, right? So they're attacking more the administration, I think. But cannabis, is that collateral damage there if that should get through to an actual floor vote? Right. Maybe. Do I think it will? I don't think so. I don't think that is something that will have a ton of legs. But when it comes to the Democratic side of things, obviously, we wanted a lot more to happen in a Biden presidency that we didn't get. And here at the end, we're anticipating, we're hoping for rescheduling. I know the Chevron ruling put a lot of people off last week, but that, I think it was because of comments from the law firm that was doing the Commerce Clause lawsuit. And that was actually taken out of context initially around what that meant for rescheduling. So rescheduling is going to be brought up in every single conversation. But the fact of the matter is that it has good legs right now still. There's a lot of potential downfalls in it. But if it happens, 280E may go away. Would an excise tax come and take its place per, I think you've said that in the past, right? Potentially, or others have said that in the past. We just don't know what that final structure looks like. Right. So I think you as a business have to expect that it doesn't happen if you can, right? And have to prepare for the worst and run as a business that if you found additional liquidity because you didn't have to pay a tax, obviously that's icing on the cake. If it's possible, obviously, listen, it's a lot easier said than done. This industry is running some people ragged, and I hope to God that we get rescheduling soon.
Yeah, it's not just investor fatigue, it's operator fatigue, it's ancillary fatigue. I've seen a lot of advisors kind of come and go because this industry is just brutal, and operators are doing the best they can. We're ducking and dodging and trying to figure out the best way forward. And this was just kind of, we need to hear good news. We need to hear good news, but we also need to be realistic and plan for right now. So, rescheduling for me, it might take away 280E. I think that's amazing, but the government giveth and the government taketh away. And sometimes they take it away and, they take it away even worse, And so we always need to prepare. And, for me, I definitely don't want to get too much into taxes, but there's a lot of options out there where businesses actually don't have to pay as much as they think they need to pay with 280E. I've been through a ton of audits, been able to successfully help clients and things like that, as well as other advisors have been able to as well. I'm not the only one. But there's a lot of things out there that you can do. Okay. And so if you do it wisely, I think you can keep that money in your pocket right now. There's a lot of aggressive options, very, very aggressive options. There's a little bit more middle of the road. There's a little bit more conservative options, and depends on who you are, who you're involved with in business, whether you want to take those more aggressive options are and what your future is. Kind of circling back to investors don't like to see risky tax positions, but if you're not in that position, you don't need investment and you have a high risk tolerance, then hey, So I would say we need to live for today and think outside the box. And again, to me, 280E shouldn't be as big of a deal as some folks are making it out to be. I just don't see the effects, having done this for about 10 years, that if you think a little bit outside the box, obviously you have to do things legally. It shouldn't have as much of an impact as the numbers that I hear kind of thrown around, Yeah. So,
and, in respect to like businesses, I would say like overall state taxes, like in California, are magnanimously like
Yeah.
the ones that are causing a lot of issues, right?
Right.
Plus 280E, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, get help where you can, right?
Right.
I would say, and I'm sure people like Rachel, at the very least can advise you,
Mhm.
if there's not room for a full-time partnership, right?
Right.
We do the same, right? Benzinga, we try and provide access to a lot of businesses to our events. Every event, I think we've provided over 500 companies free access to our event because we want them to get that networking. We want them to better the industry from
Right.
top to bottom, because the moment that this industry takes a step forward, the better it is for all of us. So,
Well, and that speaks to the power of community and the power of actually working together. I really believe everybody should work together as much as possible and avoid as much infighting within the industry as possible. I know there's a lot of controversies and things like that, and it's kind of a microcosm of the country as a whole, because I think if people can avoid arguing about small things, right, and look at the big goal, which is we need to make this industry, the small and medium-sized operators, viable. And what do we do to do that? And even the large operators, just the industry as a whole, that's the bigger goal.
yeah,
The controversy right now, hemp versus cannabis, and to me, it's just another divisive way to split the industry. And I think any kind of division makes the industry weaker in general. And so I think we can agree to disagree. And I think that's very, very important to keep the industry unified, because the industry, has a lot of obstacles with regulators, politicians, and things like that. And I think the people obviously need to unite. Operators need to unite, and that's the only way that we can be a force for change.
Oh, yeah.
In taxes, regulators, things like that.
We had it set at our 2023
Mm-hmm.
Florida cannabis event. We had Representative Dean Phillips
Mm-hmm.
come, and he talked to U.S. Representative Troy Carter. And Phillips was very clear, and he was very straightforward with the audience that day. Obviously, not it was your fault, audience, but like what he's experienced is that there's a very ununified lobbying front from this
Right.
industry. Right. There's different lobbying groups that are doing different things and asking for different things. And they're not even close to asking for
Mhm.
the same thing.
Right.
Right. And without pointing fingers, because at least those lobbying firms are there, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we as an industry are not helping, unfortunately, ourselves on the federal landscape, good or bad, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
there's we can hash that out internally in this space, but
Mm-hmm.
just to hear what he had to say, that you need to come to us at Congress with a unified voice, I
Yes.
thought was very telling. And I'm not sure we're there yet in terms of the lobbying efforts. Now, there are
Right.
some great lobbyists in the industry, and it's not what I'm saying. It's more
Right.
so the communication from the industry to Congress is just not the same from different people.
Totally. Totally. I mean, if we have limited lobbying resources, and I mean financial resources, and let's just be frank, it costs a lot of money to
A
support
lot of money.
lobbyists. So are you
Yes.
going to divide the pie, divide the, whatever causes you're trying to support, and you're going to divide it. So that lack of unification is not going to get things
Right.
over the finish line. So that makes it
Well,
very, very difficult.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
we're also not being helped as an industry from regulations,
Right.
understanding what even we should be asking for. So maybe a catch-22 there,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, one of these days we will have to unify for one reason or another, and I hope it's sooner rather than later. But hopefully, rescheduling helps us take it
Right.
there, and hopefully we get a Garland memo to go along with it, or some memo to go along with it. All that said, I think going back to your point about
Mm-hmm.
community, I think that's exactly what Benzinga is, and what other
Yes.
events are, right? It's not just us. In
Mm-hmm.
my we work with all the events in the space
Mm-hmm.
because rising tide lifts all ships. MJ Biz is a great partner of ours at Benzinga. We
Right.
work with, we talk to MJ Impact all the time. We want to make sure that you find value in events, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
events are there to help you with your business. Events are there to help you grow, help you find strategies, right, that you can employ the next day.
Right.
That's what the education is there for, the panels, for you to understand the context of the industry of what you are working within. right? So, and I will say there's nothing like the conversations you have at events, whether
Totally.
it's a happy hour you go to thrown by 420 CPA and Beer Pros,
Mhm.
or whether it's the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference or MJ Biz in Vegas, right? Having those
Mhm.
conversations is always going to be valuable, right? You will always meet somebody where at the very least you can refer, you can partner, right? Or you may meet somebody that wants to put money into your business because you may be, excuse my language, kick ass,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have gotten that if you hadn't gone out there, right? You may come across somebody who may want to buy your dispensary, right? Or
Right.
maybe there's co-ownership. I don't know, right? There's tons of things that come out of
Just a
conversations.
sharing of knowledge in general.
Exactly.
It's like that rises all ships as well as just the conversations and educating. And sometimes, you don't get anything out of it. You just educate and it helps the industry as a whole. And I think that's really important. I see a lot of that happening at events, which to me are like the lifeline and lifeblood of the industry as well, because we are a very relationship based industry, which is why I love it.
Mhm.
You know, we see people in any geography in the Northeast and the Midwest, everywhere. And we're all kind of working in the same direction in general. But it's those relationships that get formed. We see each other on Zoom, then we see each other in person, and then we get to know about each other, even sometimes on a more personal level. And then we're just more bought in
Mhm.
to the relationship. So I think I've never seen such an industry that's so relationship oriented and so collaborative. I kind of talked about the division, but on the other side of that, there's folks are like renegades. We're on the forefront.
Mhm.
We're collaborative. We
They're
thrive
real.
based on relationships. We're very real. Exactly. Authentic is like key. You
Mhm.
can't get through the doors if you're not authentic because people are
Oh,
going to kick you right out. And that's exactly what happens.
yeah.
So, so they won't accept
100%.
you.
Yeah, this is yeah, sorry.
No,
But
no. Yeah.
yeah, this industry is it's exciting, right?
Right.
I saw a post from David, who is the CEO and founder of Flower Hire, right? And
Mhm.
the first line was, "We get to do this."
I saw that.
I'm sure a lot of people saw it that are
Yeah.
watching here, right? It was a great post, right? I think that shot of optimism is what events can do,
Right.
right? Honestly, when I'll be real with you guys, going into our Florida event this spring, I was kind of nervous. I thought it
Yeah.
might have been a little bit of a shit show, but it came out really, really well. And I think impartial reasoning is because people were optimistic,
Hmm.
and that then the sense of optimism will always help more business get done.
Right.
And I think, looking at what happened in Florida, a ton of money moved.
Yeah.
So all that said, I think, just to, I know we're coming to time here, but, for
Right.
me, how you can engage with Benzinga, first and foremost, we are media. We are a media publication. And you, please engage us as such. We want to cover your news. We want to cover what's happening in the markets that you work within, right? It's up to the editor. I'm not a part of the editorial desk, but cannabis news at benzinga.com. If you ever want to put your company out there to get coverage, they cover as much as they can. We have a team of writers that's international that's working around the clock on our cannabis
Mhm.
articles. So that is something where, if you are a company and you have news, please put it in front of us. The worst that they can say is maybe not now,
Right.
right? But they cover news from startups to public companies every single day. Um, Beyond that, our events, Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference, October 8th and 9th. It's just bzcannabis.com to go check that out. We'll have a variety of speakers there, from Congress people. We have a billionaire Tesla investor that's speaking at the event that hasn't spoken on cannabis in
Mhm.
years. So we're going to have phenomenal capital markets discussions. We're going to have phenomenal retail and CPG discussions. And then last but not least, as you mentioned, the State Market Series. And I appreciate you being so supportive of that.
Mhm.
Sincerely, Rachel. But that's something that we're very excited about. We did it in Culver City in February. We did New Brunswick, New Jersey in June. We have one more in Anaheim, Southern California, November 12th. Please make sure to check that out if you're in the area. We're going to have a lot of cool speakers. Our goal with these smaller events is for the leading companies to be there, and then for companies that are doing well. Is that
Mhm.
my first time talking about California with some of these partners? I was shocked at how many businesses are actually doing well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A few years ago, I thought most of our clients were, going to have a really, I mean, they definitely did have a hard time. I didn't know if they were going to come through on the other side of it. And people are doing better this year than they were last year in the same quarter. So that's what we're seeing. And I'm so happy and thrilled for the industry that the California industry can rebound like this. So super, super happy for that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
A long way to go, right? In some of these markets, a long way to go. But I think the best way to fix that is to do it together, right?
Totally.
So come hang out with Rachel and I in October and November.
Yeah, awesome. And then also the Beard Bros.
And Beard Bros.
We have a bunch of events that we're going to be hitting Q3, Q4 all together. We'll be coming to Benzinga and talking to Elliot. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of events coming up. We've just kind of gone over our event calendars, and it's going to be quite a Q3 and Q4. So get out of vacation mode in a little while. I mean, you definitely need your vacations because you need your downtime, but it's almost time to get back to work. I just got off my vacation, so I don't know if everybody else is off theirs. It's time to get back to seeing each other in person. Q3, Q4 events coming up. And I know the Beard Bros are hitting the road, and I'll see you with them. And sounds like a great plan. So
let's do it. I can't wait. Yeah, my vacation was in June. We're working now, Rachel.
I know. I had my vacation in June too. I just came back. Although, I was over in Europe. I hit a bunch of dispensaries out there. It's all CBD, talked to a lot of shop owners. It was pretty fun. Even had an investor meeting up in England, and kind of interesting, but hey, real quick, I just want to ask, because I see some of our friends on here, people that I know very, very well. Marjo, how are you? Love you. Sorry, I'm going to make this a little familiar here. Casey is here. Thanks, Charles, for participating in the comments. I'm reading your comments. And Elijah D. So
Elijah, we love Elijah. Yes.
Yes. I don't know if folks have actually jumped off yet. Maybe not. But if you have any questions, folks were putting really good comments. And as we were talking, and if you have any questions right now, happy to answer some questions. If not, and folks have already signed off, then we will see you here at the Beard Bros live event in about a month. So stay tuned for those. And I don't see any questions coming in. And I see, it's funny, Florian, our CMO of our company, he said, Rachel doesn't have downtimes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I do. A little bit. I really do. I don't know about you, Elliot. Did you have some downtime on your vacation? Let's just get a little, under the hood here.
I'll give you a sense of what I was dealing with on my vacation. Is my boss called me and told me we're moving the California event from July 23rd to November 12th. So then on my vacation, I had to reach out to all of my current speakers and be like, hey, sorry, but so I was like, downtime is, it's your perspective of what downtime means, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can sit on a beach for like 2-3 hours. I can read a book. I can go, kind of mosey around. But after that, I don't know. I've got to do a little something.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think I've ever logged off for a full day. So
right, no. I don't know what that looks like. But I mean, so just kind of speaking to that, we've got 2 more minutes on a more personal, familiar topic. This industry, the way I feel, it's there's so many things that we're working on. There's so many battles we're fighting on so many fronts that we actually do really have to take some downtime,
No, mental health, right? It can suffer this day and age, not just in cannabis, but in cannabis, y'all, it's tough. It's hard. Take a breath, please. Yeah,
you got to take a breath. And even if that means if you can't take a big vacation, like a 1-week, 2-week vacation, take a 3-day weekend. It's amazing what like 1 day off can do. Or a 3-day weekend with friends, family, whatever. Because this is it's not a sprint.
Right.
This is not a sprint. I've been in the industry for a long time, for 10 years, and I've seen other advisors come in and, like I said, they get really, really burnt out, really, really tired. But we got to stay in this race for the long term. And that's operators as well. And so taking that downtime is extremely, extremely important. And, I can't emphasize that enough, whether it's one day, half a day, something.
Mm-hmm. Give yourself a break. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know, come hang out with us, somewhere. We'll go to the artistry or something in Southern California, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everybody. I didn't see any new questions coming through, but I think we're ready to say thank you. Thanks again to everybody, the Beard Bros Media. If you want to see, get in touch with me, I'm at 420cpa.com. We do have some news that we'll be releasing about a new co coming out pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. And we also have some blog material that we try to keep up on informing the industry that we'll be submitting now to you, Elliot, because I heard that.
We want it. We want it, Rachel.
Sending it over to you, and we'll see how. Yeah. So, and that's about it. So thanks everybody for joining.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you,
Beard
Bros.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Appreciate it. Thanks to the Beard Bros. Bye, guys.